إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم. Okay, so this may sound like a bit of an unconventional way to start a speech, but in order for us to experience the full benefit of this seminar, I'd like for all of us, for those that have phones, if they could please take their phones out and place them in front of them. Sisters as well, please. Take out your phones and just put them in front of you. Okay, so obviously if there's like an emergency or something, like your parents are trying to contact you, then you can go ahead and use it. But for the duration of the talk, just try and keep it in front of you without using it. And at the same time, make a conscious effort to just keep track of how many times you feel the urge to pick up your phone. Okay, you guys think you can do that? For those that have phones? All right. So this seminar is actually a combination of two different modules, right? One has to do with smartphones, the other one having to do with social media. Generally, when I give this talk, it's to an older audience, which is why I took two different talks and kind of merged them into one. We'll be skipping over certain aspects of it that have to do more with an older audience. So anyway, the reason why I chose this topic, though, is, as was mentioned, I'm a teacher. I teach the Saad course in the Chicago area. So I have a lot of experience with students as well as members in the community, because along with being a teacher, as was mentioned, alhamdulillah, I'm qualified as a Mufti as well. So a lot of people come to me, students as well as community members, with their different issues, the different problems that they're going through. And something that I've noticed is that there's some things that are obvious, right? That when it comes to smartphones, wastage of time and things like that. And there's a lot less obvious things, right? Things that are more subtle, whether it's family problems, marriage problems, sometimes even mental health issues like anxiety, depression, things like that. And a lot of the times, these issues, they stem from smartphone usage and things that are attached to social media. So because of these different issues and harms that I've seen in the lives of different people, that's why I feel like this topic is something that's very relevant for all of us. Before we get into smartphones and social media specifically, let's first analyze just the Islamic perspective on technology in general, right? So, mashallah, you guys just had your little quiz, so we could have, some couple questions over here as well. Who knows when the conquest of Mecca, when did the conquest of Mecca take place? Which year after Hijrah? You could just say it if you know it. The 12th year? No, that would not make sense because the Prophet ﷺ had passed away by that time. Any other answers?
10.
Good guess though.
7.
10? 7? Come on, man, you're mine. This is my Sira student, guys. And I did a bad job, I guess. 9th year? 8. You guys said every year except for it. Yes, 8. Who said 8?
8.
Yes, very good. 8th year after. Okay? So anyway, after the conquest of Mecca, what happened was that there were some tribes outside of Mecca that had assembled, and they were going to make a last-ditch effort on how we can stop the spread of Islam in Mecca. So what happened was that after this conquest, they all went out, the Muslims, they went out to try and neutralize that threat. In the beginning, they were ambushed, right, the Muslims, and things were not looking good, but eventually they won the battle, and it was actually quite a tumultuous victory. But anyway, after the battle was fought, the survivors, they fled to Taif. And Taif was a city that had many forts, right, with these very thick walls. And the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, when they laid siege on Taif, then they realized that we can't penetrate into these forts. So what are we going to do? One of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum suggested that let's construct a minjaniq, which you can see over here. We call it a catapult, right? And it uses those ropes that you see over there, the tension of the ropes, to launch heavy objects like rocks so that you can break down walls. Right? So the idea over here being that the Blessed Prophet ﷺ, he was open to the idea. He accepted the idea, despite this being something that wasn't really common in the Arabian Peninsula. Another example is, what's the major event that happened in the 6th year after Hijrah? Does anyone know? In the Seerah? 6th year? Any idea? It has to do with a treaty. Treaty of Hudaybiyah, very good. Right. So the Sulh, or the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, after this treaty was signed, what's one major thing the Prophet ﷺ did? Does anyone know? Something he didn't do before. No, it doesn't have to do with that. Has to do with, send letters, exactly. Letters to the different monarchs, right? He did, because now that the Quraysh was no longer a threat, they could focus on spreading Islam to other places. And when he decided to do this, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum pointed out to him that إِنَّ الْعَجَمْ لَا يَقْبِلُونَ كِتَابًا إِلَّا عَلَيْهِ خَاتَمًا, that these non-Arab leaders, they're not going to accept just any old letter. That letter needs to have an official seal on it, right? فَاسْتَنَعَ خَاتَمًا مِّن فِضَّةٍ. So that's when the Prophet ﷺ had the ring made upon which there was a seal, and he used to stamp the letters with that. So once again, the Prophet ﷺ showing his openness to these ideas, not saying that this is not our way, this is not how we do things, willing to be adaptable and innovative, despite the fact that this wasn't something that was occurring before. Right, different examples throughout history. In the year 34 AH, Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala, he would make this request often from Umar radiallahu ta'ala when he was the Khalifa, that we need to start naval warfare. We need to move our battles to the sea. Umar radiallahu anh was against it, not having to do with technological advancement, but simply because he wanted to consolidate whatever lands had been acquired. It was then in the time of Uthman radiallahu anh where they first fought in 34 AH. The first naval war was fought by the Muslims during that time, right? And even after the time of the Sahaba. Throughout history, you find many different examples. There's a scholar by the name of Abbas ibn Firnas, right, who was also an astronomer, an engineer. He made several attempts to construct a flying machine, right? And eventually it was in the year 852 where he jumped off of a minaret in the Grand Mosque of Cordoba, right? And another time he did so off of a mountain. And he was flying for a good 10 minutes, right? Which for that time, this is like 1,000 years before the Wright brothers, right? And he's a famous person. The Baghdad International Airport is named after him. There's in fact a crater on the moon that's named after him. All right, so you could say that he's one of the real fathers of flight. There was a famous scholar in Morocco as well, Fatima al-Fihri radiallahu ta'ala, a female scholar, who started a university, Jami'atul Qarwiyin, which till this day it still operates. It holds the Guinness World Book of Records. It has the record of the oldest existing, continually operating higher educational institution in the entire world. It was the first university to give out ijazat, to give out degrees. And another example, for those that, whether you're a fan of algebra or I guess you hate algebra, you can either thank or you can blame Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, rahimahullah, who, this brother, mashallah, he wrote a book, Al-Kitab al-Mukhtasar fil Hisab al-Jabr wal-Muqabala, which is a compendium having to do with calculation by completion and balancing. It was basically made to calculate, to help in zakat calculation, inheritance calculation, stuff like that. So basically the father of algebra. That's where the word algebra comes from. It's from the name of his book. And you have, mashallah, the origin of coffee being traced all the way back to Ethiopia. Mashallah, you guys have Tim Hortons over here. We don't have it in Illinois, but I miss it a lot, so I drink it whenever I get the chance. But the point is being that the way it started was in the monasteries in Ethiopia, so that those monks, so that those Muslim scholars and Sufis and whatnot, so that they could have the energy to do ibadat for a long time at night, like mashallah you guys are doing over here as well. So the point being that there's many different benefits that can be acquired through technology, through social media. The Islamic perspective on this is what? That these new gadgets and devices and whatever technological advancements that you have, they're not inherently prohibited. What really matters is how you use them. Just like how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted us the eyes that we see with, the ears that we hear with, the tongues that we speak with. Likewise, He's given us phones, He's given us tablets, He's given us laptops. What really matters is the way that we use them. Right, mashallah, today you guys were using your phones for a very great purpose, to gain knowledge in the deen in a fun and interactive way, right? So the point just being that this is, you could say, the perspective on technology, that it really matters on how it's being used. It's not in of itself, we would say that it's permissible or not permissible. So the topic itself of the day, as we were saying, starting off specifically with smartphones. So just to talk about the history very briefly, we know that the first telephone was invented by whom?
Alexander Graham Bell.
Exactly right. Alexander Graham Bell in 1876. The first cell phone, you could say, arguably, in the 1940s, the Second World War. This is kind of the first, you could say, semblance of what looks like a cell phone. It wasn't until 1973, though, that you had the famous Motorola Dynatec 8000, invented by Martin Cooper. It wasn't available to the public, though, in 1983 because they didn't have the network necessary at the time. Okay, and it was a huge device. It was almost a foot long, you know, like those Subway sandwiches, like a foot long. It weighed over 2 pounds, and, you know, as you can see here, charging time 10 hours, 35 minutes battery. $4,000 is how much it costed. This is considered to be the first cell phone. Right, and then just briefly going through, you know, you guys wouldn't really be able to appreciate it too much, so we'll just kind of skip through. You guys probably weren't even born when some of these things came out. But yeah, so it wasn't until 2007 where the biggest game changer came, right? Where Steve Jobs said that let's get rid of all of these buttons and just replace it with a giant screen. Okay? So,
there's still one button.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So just the one button and the huge screen. So this is where things started to change, where it's not only just now for calling and texting, but you got so many things that you can do that you weren't able to do before. Right, as you can see, this guy over here with his jukebox, his camcorder, all of these different things now fit inside of our pockets and so much more. Right, but this is where we start to get into the kind of the problem, right? Because before, there's not really too many negative aspects of just calling and texting and things like that. But now you've got your YouTube, your WhatsApp, your videos, sending different things, looking at different things. This is where you start to get into your issue. Okay, so just to briefly talk about the popularity of phones before we get into some of the negative aspects of it. Some of these statistics are a bit outdated. Basically what it's showing us here is that in 2019, when I first gave this seminar, 75% of people in the US had smartphones. Now the numbers are up to 85%. And it's not just in the US, but around the globe. There's now around, 7.8 billion people, and around 7 billion people have smartphones around the world. Yeah, this says 6 billion. It's outdated statistics. Sorry about that. But the point being, the numbers are kind of the same. Around 85% of the people around the world, which is extremely surprising considering that only about 4.5 billion people have access to working toilets. It really shows you where your priorities are. So yeah, a person may be thinking that, okay, what's the problem? More people that have phones, more people that are connected. What's the issue? So one of the biggest issues that comes up with phones is how much we use them. Okay? As you can see, some of these statistics here. And you could say around 5 hours a day, right? Around 5 hours a day by average, people in the US, and it's higher for younger adults and for teenagers, is how much time people are using just checking their phones. Every free moment that we have, when we're waiting in line, whether we're sitting in the masjid, whether we are stopped at a red light, this is the first thing that we turn toward, right? Just think about, in place of that before these things were there, then the way that Muslims would generally spend their time then is that you pull out your tasbih, right? You would start doing some dhikr. Just imagine when you're waiting in line at the DMV or at the store or something, instead of just wasting time on your bottomless scrolls, if you were to recite Surah Al-Ikhlas, right? Person who recites Surah Al-Ikhlas 10 times, what's the reward? A palace in Jannah. Imagine how many palaces you could be building in Jannah, as opposed to that you are just wasting time on your phone. So the point just being that a lot of time gets wasted, and we have a very strong attachment to our phones, right? This phenomenon of nomophobia, when you don't have your phone, you start to feel that anxiety. You start to feel, some people even report feeling sick when they don't have their phones. So this all points to what? This points to a larger issue, that they're not just devices that are helping us achieve different tasks, they're becoming an integral part of our life, right? And this is a bit of an exaggerated example, but you know how it is. Like, you forget your phone, you might drive back home just to get it, right? This guy over here is doing so in a hurricane, but once again, it's just an exaggerated example. Now, as for the reason, so getting into kind of like why is it that we have such a strong attachment to our phones? One of the this is an example, okay? Now, I know a lot of us probably, maybe you guys do, but a person might think that, okay, fine, I don't play games, so this is not going to apply to me, but I'll show you guys, this is just an example, and this can apply to other people as well. So this example over here is of a game. You have a game, it gives you a goal, you need to clear all the jelly. All right. So this is how many games work, that you need to achieve an objective, and when you achieve that objective, then your brain gets happy. It lights up, right, with the burst of dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's a chemical that's basically released by your neurons, and it makes you feel good, right? And after you get that feeling, then your brain, your body, it craves for more. It wants to come back for more, right? So that's why you want to keep on playing, and you keep on coming back to that game, and you feel that dopamine rush, you crave that feeling again, you keep on doing it again and again until this results in what we call a compulsion loop or a dopamine loop, right? And this same exact loop or the same phenomenon is what occurs when it comes to addiction to cigarettes, when it comes to hard drugs like cocaine and other things like that. It's the same exact psychological process, right? So now a person, as I was saying, a person may think like, well, I don't have, Candy Crush or any other game on my phone, so this doesn't apply to me. But it doesn't just apply to games, right? Raise your hand if you have one of these apps on your phone, or rather if you use one of these apps, I guess.
Joke's on you, I don't have a phone.
What about now? Okay, so at least those that have phones, it seems like pretty much everyone. So yeah, the point is being that this doesn't just apply to, it just doesn't apply to games, right? Whether it's the likes that you're getting, the messages that you're getting, it's that same loop where that's why, even with WhatsApp, when you send a message, you're waiting for that reply. You keep on checking, you're getting that double check mark, the blue check mark, right? That's all invented for that purpose, to keep you coming back. And the point of showing all of this is to say that it's not just something that happened on its own. It's something that it's set by design, though, that the creators of the phones themselves are the ones that are manipulating this sort of, psychological, you could say this susceptible place, like I'll show you guys the wording that's being given. Yeah, this vulnerability in human psychology, it's in of itself is being exploited. Okay? Yeah, and a lot of times we don't realize it, right? We don't realize what's going on because we're getting a lot of these things for free. Okay? Because let's just, what's like the idea behind it, you could say? Why would any company want to do this for free? So the thing is that in the first, you could say 50 years of Silicon Valley, the industry, they made products, right? Whether it's hardware, software, sell these things, it's a simple business, right? But during the last 10 years, you could say the top companies in the industry, their business is not selling products, it's selling users, okay? The reason we don't pay for the products like YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and things like that is because the advertisers are paying for them. You understand? The advertisers are the customers. We're the thing that's being sold. Okay? And this is what has made these tech companies the most richest companies in all of history. Right? Each one is trying to see and design their apps in such a way to keep you on that app as long as possible. That's why you have your bottomless feed. Right? That's why you have, these different algorithms and whatnot to keep you coming back for more and more, so that you can spend as much time as possible using those things, right? Right. So this is just an example of former executive of Facebook, where he's talking about the same exact thing, that this whole dopamine loop, they're just taking advantage of that, despite the fact that they know that it's harmful, despite the fact that they know that it's addictive, they did it anyway, right? Because they just answer to the almighty dollar, na'udhu billah, that they can make as much money as possible. That's the reason why they're doing it. So the point of this is not to say, it's not to scare us, right? Although yes, it's true that everything is being tracked, as far as like which image you're looking at, which video you're looking at, how long you're watching it, right? So they know what you're doing, what you're watching, and they're trying to take advantage of it as much as they can. Once again, the point of it not to scare us, but so that we just realize, right? The point of it is so that we're not naive and we don't think that, okay, these things are free, these things are entertaining, so there must, there's no harm entailed, right? It's just to open our eyes a little bit to get an idea of what's really going on behind the scenes. Okay, so now that we've spoken about a bit of why the problem is there, let's talk about how we can solve that problem. So although it may sound a bit counterproductive, one of the best ways to get over a smartphone addiction is by using the different apps. A lot of our phones, they already have them. You have a lot of Android phones, Google ones specifically, they have this thing called digital well-being. It keeps track, because this is kind of the first step. The first step is realizing that you even have an issue. Because many of us, we don't even realize how long it is that we end up using our phones, right? As I was mentioning earlier, like an average Netflix user, for example, statistics show that average Netflix user uses Netflix for 2 hours every single day. And an average social media user uses it for on average 3 hours per day. So assuming that they're not doing both at the same time, that's literally just 5 hours of every single day that's being completely wasted. But people don't realize it, right? I can mention to you some examples of different students that, they're going through different issues, and we may give them like a prescription, like, okay, this is, along with doing such and such things, you need to read this much amount of dhikr every day, like read this or read that. And then, they'll come back sometime later and say, like, can you lower it? Because it's taking too long, right? So you can then see, like, okay, let's look at the tracker on your phone. You spend this many hours watching YouTube, this many hours, scrolling through your WhatsApp messages, and you're saying you can't take out like 15, 20 minutes just to do some dhikr, right? So many hours are being wasted, and you can't take out this much time to read some Quran. So that's why it's important because we don't realize it, right? That we use these sort of apps, they have different limits and whatnot that you can set. This one, as I said, is for Android. If you don't have an Android, then you can throw it out. Sorry, if you have an iPhone, then you can throw it out. Get an Android, or iPhones also have this app as well. Screen time is another app that can be used, and like I said, you can set different limits and different things like that. The main thing over here is identifying the problem, like how much time is being used. Another thing that we can do is to try to turn off our notifications. Right? Different phones have features like Do Not Disturb, where, for example, like myself personally, the only thing where my phone will actually like give a sound is if I'm getting a call, right? So that's why I tell people, if you need to reach me, then just call me. Otherwise, all the different, whether it's a text message, whether it's an email, that you just turn those things off. Honestly, you're not really going to lose anything, because that's what a lot of the time goes to. A lot of the distractions that happen, it can really harm a person's productivity. Where you're trying to study, you're trying to read some Quran, you're even perhaps praying salah, and you get that notification. You get that buzz, you get that beep on your phone, and now your concentration is completely gone, right? And as soon as you finish your salah, it's almost as if you're checking to see. One scholar, he put it, like you're looking to see as if you got a notification on whether your salah was accepted or not, right? That's how fast people take out their phone as soon as their salah finishes. So don't let your phone have this constant control over you. That since we're always keeping it in our pockets, if they're constantly buzzing and beeping all the time as well, then that will distract us even more and even take more of our time away from things that would be more beneficial. Okay, so we can skip through this slide over here. So that has to do with, as we were saying, like trying to save ourselves from wasting too much time on our phones. Now we can get into some of the places where we should try not to even use our phones. So one example of that is in the bathroom, which unfortunately is getting more and more common every single day, where you have majority of people in America, they bring their phones in the bathroom. And a lot of people end up dropping their phones in the toilet, which is obviously very unhygienic. And even if it doesn't fall in the toilet, it's still unhygienic, right? Many studies show that like the amount, it's pretty gross, but like the amount of like fecal matter that is found on the surfaces of people's phones, it's really crazy. Right, because just the fact that you're bringing it in there when you flush the toilet, you're washing, you're cleaning, whatever the case may be, and you're touching your phone at the same time, this is really gross. So from an Islamic perspective, we're supposed to be, very mindful of our hygiene, and at the same time, from a spiritual perspective, we know, since we were kids, mashallah, some of you guys are still kids. Before you enter the bathroom, what's the dua that you recite? You can just say it. Right? You're seeking refuge with Allah from who? Right, from the different the evil spirits that reside there. Right? So we know that the bathroom, it's a place of filth, it's a place of evil spirits. So you don't want to spend more time there than necessary. You don't want to spend more time there than you need to. You should try and get out there as soon as possible. And mashallah, we're all good brothers here. So we know that in our feeds, there's a lot of Islamic reminders, right? Randomly, some Quranic ayat will come up. Someone will send you a text message like, hey man, like I'll be there in 10 minutes, inshallah. Nice post on Facebook, mashallah. You know, so the point being that these things, they'll just come up. If you're just using your phone and these things come up, it's the name of Allah is included in there. So this is showing disrespect to the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. We know the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that ring that we showed earlier, he would always take off his ring, right, before he would enter the restroom to refrain from disrespecting the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one more issue with phones in the bathroom, which, you know, it ties into something that we'll touch on later, and it really deserves its own topic. But you know, when it comes to different people that come with their issues, as I mentioned earlier, probably one of the biggest issues that people have is seeing these, looking at filthy images and videos and things of that sort. So this sort of addiction that's there. Unfortunately, what happens is that when people take their phones in the bathroom, then that's one of the main ways that it ends up happening, right? Because, I mean, if you just think about it, like you're already in a private location, you know, to be quite frank, your pants are already off, right? So you're halfway there already, okay? So this is a recipe for disaster. Even if you have an innocent reason for bringing your phone inside of the restroom, things end up happening, right? So one of the ways to prevent ourselves from that is just to not bring our phones in the restroom at all, just to get in and out as quick as possible. Another place we shouldn't be using our phone as well, driving, texting and driving is extremely dangerous. The main statistic I want to highlight here is that 98% of adults know that texting and driving is dangerous, and yet 50% admit to doing it anyway. Right? And that really shows what? These are signs of addiction. These are signs that you know that something is dangerous. You know that something could potentially kill you, harm you, and your family, and you're willing to put all that at risk just so that you can answer a text message, just so that you can read your emails. Right, so it's extremely dangerous. Or I guess in some cases, so you can catch that, you know, Charizard or whatever when Pokemon Go was going on. That's the thing, right? So it's something it's very dangerous, right? And we know as Muslims that how shameful would it be, honestly, that if we were to, na'udhu billah, may Allah save us from any sort of death like this. But you know, if someone were to pass away because of that reason, right? We want to be such that we want to pass away in such a state that, you know, we're in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we're doing something good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلَا تَلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ, that basically don't do anything that will put yourself into danger, right? So that's why it's very important that we're mindful of this. You know, in GPSs and things like that, you turn your notifications off, you get one of those stands. You know I bought a lot of these stands actually for my friends. If you need one, I have some lying around in Chicago, though you have to come over there. I can give you one, inshallah, right? So don't be that guy that, you know, has the phone in one hand that's looking at directions and driving with the other. This is something that, you know, Islamically as well, we should just save ourselves from putting ourselves in that danger. Another situation is when we're at the dinner table, right? This is, once again, extremely common in our day and age, especially from the perspective of spending time with our family members. This is a time where, especially when it comes to, we know in Islam how important it is to respect your parents, to respect your elders, right? The Prophet ﷺ, when he would talk to someone, then he would face them completely, such that even his chest would be facing the person, right? But if we're just, you know, half our attention is here, half our attention is on our phone, and, you know, we're really going to regret that later. That the time we could have spent with our parents, listening to their stories, listening to our elders, the different things that they could have told us, eventually we'll lose that opportunity, right? So whatever time we have with our parents, with our family, we try to take advantage of that, right? Don't have your phones, you know, out in front of your parents. Don't have it at the dinner table and other such places, so that you can spend as much time and benefit from them as much as possible, right? And these are some of the things that attach to like family and marriage and stuff like that, so we can just kind of gloss over some of these slides over here. Yeah, poor Noman. Well, I mean, Noman is, he's the one who's mentioning about the husband, poor husband, I guess. Right. Yeah, I mean, this also ties into kind of like raising kids and stuff like that, which unfortunately is also it's a huge thing, right? Nowadays, when I address with the elders as well, it's very common, right? That the parents, they want to be using their devices, whether it's watching TV, using their phones. So what they do then is that they get another device, another screen that they then give to the kid to distract the kid so that they can focus on their own devices, right? And when it comes to children, like I said, this isn't exactly pertinent to you guys, but as we mentioned earlier, like the dopamine effects, right, that it can have on an adult brain, just imagine on a brain that's still developing, how harmful that can be. Right, and this once again has to do a lot with raising kids and stuff like that. Yeah, so one more thing before we move on to the social media is that no phones in the bedroom, right? As we touched upon earlier, that this is something that is just a recipe for disaster, right? If a person brings their phone inside of the bedroom, then although once again your intentions may be innocent, that you're trying to use it for some sort of good purpose, you might be just reading something or watching an Islamic video, whatever the case may be. But there's certain triggers, right? And once again, like people that have these sort of addictions and whatnot, they mention like this is kind of one of the main things we want to identify. Like, what are the triggers? What's causing you to fall into these sort of sins? Because once that trigger occurs, then that determination, it just, until that desire isn't fulfilled, the person doesn't stop, right? I know of one brother, subhanAllah, like this doesn't have to do with him using his phone, but basically like at one point he just, that he became, you could say, aroused, that trigger occurred, and he didn't even have an internet connection. He literally drove 4 hours to get to some sort of library so that he could go and fulfill his desire using the internet over there, right? You have other, and I guess for us, a lot of times one is fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But unfortunately that doesn't really do the trick for a lot of people. So you also have to highlight the different harms that can occur. Because a person, let's say like a youngster, feels that, okay, fine, I'll just do it for now, and then when I get married, everything will be fine. I can give it up once I get married. But that's not the case. So many people have come to me and to other scholars with these problems. One brother, it's very sad. Just very recently he was mentioning about, that from a young age he was addicted to these kind of things. And that's what he thought, is when I get married, I'll just stop. And now he is married and he has a kid. And he's literally, because of that addiction from the past, in the month of Ramadan, he's going out and he's committing zina with women, right? Leaving his family and kid at home. Right, so these sort of addictions, they don't just go away. A person needs to identify them from beforehand. Like I said, it's kind of a topic for another day. Maybe that's something we could talk about in more detail in the future. And it's both sides. It's not just men, women, unfortunately, get involved in these sort of things as well. And it's really a recipe for disaster. And this is one of the best ways to prevent that from happening. Right? A lot of us, we live with our parents. Right? So probably one of the easiest ways to prevent this is you don't have to tell them why. But just tell them that, hey, before I go to sleep, I just want to leave my phone with you. Right? I'm just going to leave my phone with you. I'll get it back in the morning. Right? You don't have to tell them the reason why. But that's probably the best way to do it. So that way you don't end up taking in the bedroom. It doesn't end up resulting in what it results in. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the smartphone section. So we can quickly move on then to the social media. Now, what is social media? Social media, this is kind of the place where we would put in this long, complicated definition that no one's actually going to remember. The easier explanation would be, as social media is basically all of these apps that we were talking about earlier, right? In case there's any nerds in the audience, there's your definition right there. But like I was saying, it's basically the different apps. Based on this definition, you can include WhatsApp in there as well, newer things like TikTok. I don't think Snapchat is there, but obviously that would be a form of social media too. So yeah, that's what it is. And in terms of popularity, once again, these statistics are outdated. This has now gone up to 65% of the world population are active social media users. And this statistics kind of remain the same. This statistic, in 2019, you have about 80% of the US population that use any social media. So that's kind of stayed around the same level, right? Facebook now has 3 billion monthly active users, and this also stands true that if it was a country, would have had the largest population in the world. Okay, how are we doing so far with the phones? You guys have been able to resist the urge Have you felt the urge?
About 2-3 times over here.
2-3 times, okay. So, fiqh of social media, right? So there's a book written by Umar Uthman. He's not a scholar, but he wrote this under the supervision of scholars. It's extremely beneficial. I would highly recommend it. A lot of the upcoming slides are, the framework is based on what he writes in there. And it just goes through different aspects of social media, how we should approach it. You can find a PDF of it online, and physical copies are, I think, available on Amazon as well, in case anyone is interested. The first thing I wanted to address when it comes to social media has to do with the things that we post, right? So when it comes to the different things that we're posting, then one thing that we should definitely try our best to refrain from is anything that could be considered a form of publicizing our sins, right? The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that all of the people of my ummah will be forgiven كل أمتي معافى إلا المجاهرين, except for the mujahideen, except for those that publicly sin. And then he explained that it's not just that a person goes out and does something, but someone does something in the dark of the night, no one knows about it, Allah hid that person's sin. Despite the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hid his sin, the next day, يَصْبِحُ يَكْشْفُ صَدْرُ اللَّهِ, that he opens the you could say the veil that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed upon his sin, and he informs people that عَمِلْتُ هَذَا بَارِحًا, that this is what I did last night. Right? So this is extreme ungratefulness to Allah. That Allah has covered our sin, and then we go ahead and start. It's almost as if we are asking Allah to not forgive us when we tell people about the sins that we're committing. Okay? And a lot of times, we may not even realize it. This is just, once again, an exaggerated example of how someone scrolling through someone else's profile, you can see some of the things that are going on, which once again, because it's so common nowadays, we don't even realize it. Someone may, you have these things where your Spotify account keeps track of, this is how many hours, I listened to music for this week, or I'm watching such and such show, you should watch it as well. I'm so excited to watch so-and-so movie. We may feel that, movie, TV, these things may not be that bad, but in reality they are, right? In reality, there's many different harms that are entailed in watching these things, not only from the music perspective, but from seeing the opposite gender. As we mentioned earlier, those triggers, right? Those triggers that occur because the people in these TVs and shows and whatnot, they're extremely attractive, right? That, a person may see someone like an actress, or someone, a girl sees an actor or something like that, this person's pretty good looking. Maybe I'll look up some pictures of this person online, and one thing leads to another. So you get the point, right? Is that you may be the reason for someone falling into a certain type of sin because you were encouraging it, right? Either you told that maybe a person says that I watched such and such thing, or I did such and such thing, and now other people see that. So just like how you have people that, through encouraging good, a person will come on the Day of Judgment and they'll have thousands, maybe even millions of good deeds that they'll think that I never even did any of these things, right? But the inverse of that is also true. That a person, because of the negative things that they may be putting out there, that a person could come, may Allah save us, on the Day of Judgment and have thousands of sins, and they would think, I didn't even do any of these things, right? Because of that negative influence that someone may be having on someone else. So some of the action items here would then be, of course, number one, that don't post about sinful things. Obviously, a person shouldn't be doing any sins in the first place, but if someone is going to do it, once again, not saying to do it, but if you do, then just don't tell others about it. Don't post about it, even in real life. Don't tell people about the sins that are there, because that that encourages others for it as well. And the second thing you could say is that instead of posting things that are, having to do with sin, that a person posts encouraging things, right? That you share different flyers for, programs that are going on, different opportunities for giving sadaqah and things like that, so that you can, instead of putting out that negative influence, that you encourage people toward positive things that will lead to a reward for you. Another thing to be mindful of when posting on social media and sharing things with others is al-ayn, right? Is the evil eye. And it's true that yes, in some cultures, the evil eye is emphasized more than it should be, and that has harms entailed in it as well, where, some people, you see that in marriages a lot, where two people will not be getting along, and they'll say they'll just blame it on shaitan, they'll just blame it on another and things like that. Whereas in reality, they might have actual issues that they need to work on, whether it's anger issues or whatever the case may be. So it's not like the almighty, powerful thing that leads to all the problems that you have in your life. But at the same time, it's important to understand that this concept of the evil eye is strongly based in our tradition as well. Right? To just mention briefly, you guys were, there was some questions having to do with Yaqub alayhi salam and his sons. So when they were going to the city, we learned, what was the question, do you guys remember? That had to do with the stars. How many stars? 11 stars, right? So these are the 11 sons. And these are all tall, handsome young men who are from a different location, you could say, so kind of exotic as well, you could say. So the Mufassirin explained that when they were entering into the city, Yaqub alayhi salam told them that don't all go from the same gate into the city, rather enter from separate gates. Because if you all come together, that's going to attract more attention, and that could attract the effect of the evil eye. Likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam regarding the kuffar that they could almost cut you down with their eyes. How can someone harm you with their eyes just by looking at you? So this, the Mufassirin explain once again, has to do with that evil eye, right? That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is being told, as the Mufassirin explain, that literally that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not protect you, out of jealousy, the kuffar by looking at you, it would have reached the point that it could have even killed you. Right? In the hadith they show this as well. This I pulled from online is actually a bit of a mistranslation. The actual Arabic is al-aynu haqq. Right? Al-aynu haqq, that part is right. That the evil eye is true. It can cause a mountain to collapse. It's actually tastanzilul hariq. Which doesn't mean it causes a mountain to collapse, but rather it can cause someone to fall off of a mountain. It can cause someone to fall off of a mountain. There's another hadith, al-aynu tadkhilu rajul al-qabr wa tadkhilu al-jamal al-qidr, that the evil eye is such that it can literally kill a person. It can take a person to his grave. It can take a camel into a pot, meaning that it can kill a camel as well. So the point is being that it is something to be aware of. Once again, it's not like you should be extremely scared, don't tell anyone about anything, as we'll get to. But it is something that there is a basis for it in the Quran and in the Hadith. Okay, so you have this comic over here. The point of this just to show that a lot of times we don't realize, right, that there may be a person who's going through difficulty trying to get married. They open their social media, all they see are newlywed couples posting their pictures from their honeymoon. You got them, writing the heart in the sand and the beach, and like the toe is pointed toward the sand, and all these other different pictures. So imagine how that makes that person feel, right? Because that's what it is, right? I don't know if I explained yet or not, but evil eye is basically that. Someone feels jealousy toward you. Because of that jealousy that they feel, you end up getting harmed in some way or the other. Usually it has to do with the blessing that they're becoming jealous of, but it could harm you in other ways as well, right? A person is stuck in a dead-end job. They have a very difficult boss, right? And they see people online, social media, maybe even their friends, maybe even their family, getting promoted. This guy's not even qualified. He's getting promoted. I'm not getting promoted. This could lead to that same jealousy, right? A couple that's struggling to conceive, they see pictures, all day and all night of videos and pictures of people posting of their kids and whatnot. So you understand, right? The feelings that a person, these feelings of jealousy and envy, they are not only harmful for the person who's feeling them, but they can even harm the person that they're feeling jealous of. Right? So it's two perspectives here. One is that we need to protect ourselves by being careful in what we post, right? And the second thing we'll get to. But as far as when it comes to things that we post, so just be mindful of that. Just think before posting that what are the pros and the cons? What's the benefit that I'm getting out of this, and what's the potential harm? So if you think about it, there's no benefit, right? You're just going to get maybe some likes. You're going to get, some comments. Some people might share what you have put out there. But at the end of the day, how is that really going to benefit you? And the cost is the potential harm that could occur. You understand? So it's understandable, I know, because it's the innate quality of human beings that you want to come off as impressive. You want to come off as attractive. You want people to think good of you. So if a person already is in the habit of doing it, then one way to sort of wean yourself off is instead of making things completely public, that maybe you share with just a few people, right? That you have your close family group, your close friends group, people that you know that most likely won't feel that sort of jealousy toward you, or people that you know that will say, MashaAllah, and other such things. And you can just share it with those limited people as opposed to putting it out to the general public. Right? And the second aspect is that we should try to save our own selves from being jealous. One is that we save others from becoming jealous of us. The other is that we try our best to not look at the things that people are putting out there so that we don't feel jealousy. Right? Because the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that jealousy is something that يَأْكُلُ الْحَسَنَاتِ. It eats up good deeds just as the fire eats up dry wood. Right? Because jealousy is something because when you're going through your social media feed, you may see things that make you feel sad. Right? You may see things that make you feel happy, make you laugh. And those are temporary feelings that go away. But jealousy and envy is something that can find itself into your heart and fester, and it can cause these sort of feelings of resentment toward people, which would then result in a loss of good deeds. Right? So the instruction of the Prophet ﷺ is, instead of looking at those that are higher than you from a material perspective, always try to look at those that are lower. Right? Look at those people that are less fortunate, so that you can be more grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because looking at those that are at a higher level would cause you to feel that jealousy and feel that ingratitude to Allah. And another thing to keep in mind when it comes to seeing different posts that people have is a lot of it is not even true. A lot of it is exaggerated, and a lot of it, as you can see this guy over here, sometimes it's not even true. Okay? Sometimes people may be just faking what they're doing, and even if they're not faking, a lot of times it's an exaggeration. Because people are putting their best life out there. Right? Whatever best meals that they're eating, whatever the new car that they bought, they try to make everything seem a lot better than it actually is. Right? So that's one thing to keep in mind that'll help us in curbing our jealousy. And at the same time, we save ourselves from falling prey to this, where we try to make it seem like one thing is happening, whereas in reality, something else is there. Right? So an example of this would be, as you see this person over here, posting about how good her relationship is with her mother, but the reality is that this is the sort of disrespect that she's showing. Right? Because the Prophet ﷺ, as you can see in this hadith, mentioned that min sharri nasi yawm al-qiyamah. Some of the worst people on the day of judgment will be those that come with one face to some people and with another face to others. Right? Other examples of this, there was actually, I don't know how long ago it was, but there was these two vloggers, right? This Muslim couple, and I think they were based in the UK. I'd rather not mention their names, but one of them, the female, in the vlog, she would be wearing full niqab, hijab, abaya, everything. And the brother, mashallah, long beard, everything like that. And, they're building followers and stuff like that. Eventually they're asking for donations for different causes and stuff. Turns out later that this woman, she doesn't wear niqab. She was caught going to clubs. She's actually like an Instagram model or something. It's a completely fake profile, double life. Showing one thing, whereas reality something is else. The brother, meaning the husband, he, long beard, everything, he was actually not even Muslim. He was a murtad. He was someone who had left the fold of Islam, right? He was an atheist, right? So these are different examples, once again, exaggerated examples, but to get the point across, that this is unfortunately someone that would fall under this hadith. Right? And you see other examples like this. The action item over here would be to make your private life better than your public life. Okay, try to make your private life better than your public life. And what does that mean? That you obviously, when it comes to your fard salah, you pray your fard salah in the masjid, right? And when it comes to sadaqah, then yes, a lot of sadaqah can be given publicly because it encourages others, right? And certain things you have to do publicly. But the salah that you pray at home, the nawafil that you pray at home, the amount of Quran you read at home should be more than that what you're doing publicly. The amount of sadaqah that you're giving publicly to encourage others, which is good, that should be less though than the amount that you give privately. You understand? So make your private life better than your public life, especially when it comes to akhlaq. Right? That you find some people, they're extremely nice, extremely kind when they're outside, but when they come home, then they're constantly barking and bickering with their family members. Right? That their akhlaq is amazing outside, but when it comes to the way that they deal with their families in their private life, then you see no such thing. Right? So make your private life better than your public life. So yeah, we could skip over this one as well. This is just about trying to live in the moment as opposed to just focusing on taking pictures and posting things, getting likes and whatnot.
Honestly, bro.
Photoshop.
Yeah, probably is actually. Okay, so this one, this is more for the elders, like the uncles and aunties. This is something that is quite common. But with younger people as well, this sometimes happens. Specifically with ahadith, we should be careful. مَنْ كَذَبَ عَلَيْهِ مُتَعَمِّدًا فَلْيَتَبَوَّأْ مَقْعَدَهُ مِنَ النَّارِ. The Prophet ﷺ said that the person who lied against me, that said that I said something when I didn't really, then he can make his abode in the hellfire. This is one of the strong, it's really a mutawatir hadith, the strongest level of authenticity. Over 70 different Sahaba narrated this hadith. Right, so we have to be very careful. Just today, I got a message about a hadith. It says, like, there's a specific dua that on the last Friday of Jummah, you need to read such and such dua, and then by the next Ramadan, you'll either live to that Ramadan, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive all of your sins. Okay? So, so there's no source, nothing like that provided. Upon doing research, we find out that, there's some, you could say, you could find the hadith in some Shi'i books, but as far as Sunni tradition is concerned, there's no evidence for this hadith. Right? So it should not be quoted. Right? So this is just one example, but we see many examples of this. When it comes to fake news and things like that, as well, we have to be very careful. You can use different websites to verify things. Even a hadith. There's one called hadithanswers.com, islamicportal.com. These websites are very good for verifying a hadith. So one last thing before we move on to the conclusion. And this one, obviously, hopefully none of us are familiar with these apps. But these are basically dating apps, right? Some things that we may be more familiar with are some of the Muslim Islamicized versions of these apps, which in the beginning, where's Ahmed? This guy reminds me of our... He's not here? So anyway, so I'm sure we know that at least like the apps in the upper right, those are a big no-no. You definitely want to avoid those. Now these Islamified versions, is it okay to use them? Is it not okay? As we'll get to, it's definitely better to avoid. And I'm not going to deny that many people have found success with these apps where they find someone who's a good candidate for marriage, end up getting married, things turn out well. But generally these are things that should be avoided, right? Because of the potential harm that's there. And you have different hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ mentions when it comes to meeting with someone of the opposite gender, then you should never be alone with them. And modern scholars have stated that messaging someone privately is the same as being alone with them. Although yes, that potential for the physical touch isn't there, but the fact that there's no one else there, and essentially you don't have your filter that you normally would have in front of others, because of that reason, the hadith applies in that situation as well. Okay? And I know, right? Sorry. So I know that it's difficult, right? Finding a spouse is difficult, right? The struggle is real, as they say. And the person whom you marry, yes, it is, as we would say, it's one of, if not the most important decision of your life. So I completely understand a person may not feel comfortable with, marrying someone that they feel they haven't really got to know yet, right? And that's a legitimate concern. And we see stories of people that, you go with your family to meet another family, you guys are just chilling there, you think it's like a normal dawat. Some girl comes out, she pours some chai, and then she leaves, and then afterward, your parents are like, so what did you think of the girl? You're like, what girl? The girl that brought the chai. It's like, oh, the chai girl? So people, they you know what I mean? Like, that's not enough, right? I understand. Unfortunately, as I was saying, like, it's more of a cultural thing. Islamically, a person's encouraged to see their spouse, to be familiar with, there's scope to get to know them, right? But within bounds, right? Within the boundaries that have been set by the Prophet ﷺ and by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because people may have pure intentions, right? And I know many examples, right? Even some of our own students. We're talking about alim course students, not even someone who's like in college or in public school. That brother, he got on one of these apps, right? Once again, he's a student of knowledge, so out of his own foolishness, you could say, he got on one of these Muslim apps, dating apps or marriage apps, if you want to call them that. And then he, is talking to a girl, matches with a girl, and they decide that they're going to meet in some park. Okay, so he goes to the park. They're just walking around. Everything seems very innocent. But after a while, then she starts grabbing his hand, she starts, touching him, trying to get him to come home with her and whatnot. And these are Muslim people, right? So alhamdulillah, he saved himself, he realized the situation, and he came running to the madrasa actually. He talked to one of the teachers. The point just being that a person's intentions could be sincere. This brother was actually just looking to get married. He just had that misconception once again, that I need to meet her privately. I need to get to know her myself before I bring her to my parents. Right? So it's something that brothers can fall into, and sisters as well. Right? I would say for sisters it's even more important to be aware of what's going on. Right? Because there's a lot of creeps. Okay? There's a lot of them. There's plenty of them. And a lot of them use these apps. Many of these guys are actually married. Right? So you have to be very careful when it comes to these things. Especially if that person's saying they don't want to get their family involved, then that's a huge red flag and everything should be cut off right there. Right? If there's any sister that is talking to a brother for the purpose of marriage, but he's saying clearly, I don't want to get the family involved right now, that's a big red flag. Right? So these are things that a person should, once again, be aware of. When it comes to using these apps, I would say, number one, that a person doesn't use them at all. Right? But if a person is going to do it, because unfortunately some of us may already be, then I would say that, number one, a person doesn't use them until they're ready to get married. Right? That's for sure. Okay? Because unfortunately that's the case. A lot of people are just there to meet people. They want to talk to the opposite gender in a way that's fun, that's cool, and they just want to, see what's going on. So until you're ready to get married, obviously, don't have the apps. And even if you do get those apps, then it shouldn't be on your phone. Right? It can be on one of your parents' phones. Which, once again, it may sound a bit strange, but if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Right? Because if you're going to be messaging, if you have it on your own phone, you're going to be messaging the person in the middle of the night. Right? And nothing halal is going to be happening at that time, right? And we already mentioned the different, ahadith that are here. Sisters as well, especially, unfortunately, I've gotten many questions. People asking that, is it okay for me to send pictures without my hijab? It's for the purpose of marriage. Is it okay for me to send even naked pictures? Some people are asking that. So-and-so is asking, and sometimes they do, na'udhu billahi min dhalik, right? And what ends up happening is that person then is now saying, if you don't send me more, I'm going to send these pictures to everybody. Right? So these are real things that happen. So we have to be careful when it comes to these things. At the end of the day, I would say it's better to avoid, but within certain parameters, there could be some scope for permissibility. So we're pretty much out of time. So we can just move on to our conclusion. Hopefully by now we realize some of the different harms that are here. When it comes to the smartphone, I guess the main thing here being that we are, at the end of the day, slaves to Allah. Don't become a slave to your phone. Right? Don't become such that you are constantly, you have the need for it. You should be able to live without it. You should be able to get on by without it. And the only way for you to achieve that is by weaning yourself off. Right? As what we would say, like digital detox. Right? Whether it's weaning yourself off, but probably the best way is to just quit everything cold turkey. Right? That just completely cut yourself off. In the month of Ramadan, this is the perfect opportunity. Right, especially we have the last 10 days. If a person can, literally get rid of your phone. Right, put it somewhere, give it to someone for the rest of Ramadan. See how it affects you. See the opening, the way that your life almost even opens up. At first it's really hard, but after a while you get used to it. Okay, so a person can do this for a temporary amount of time. And that could be, once again, it's the month of Ramadan. You go in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many of us have done that, right? Myself included, that you just don't take your phone, whether it's for 4 months, 40 days, even if it's just for 3 days. A person goes in Jamaat, but specifically they don't take their phone with them. And just see how much more productive you'll be when it comes to your ibadah, when it comes to having focus, right? So this is definitely something that we should all try out and eventually maybe work our way up such that we don't really need a smartphone. Right? Nowadays you have, mashallah, so many new phones that they have the GPS, they have the useful things, but all the different social media apps and stuff, they're not there. Right? So if that's not possible, then as we said, just keep in mind the different aspects that we said, that we considered. Get those apps that track and limit your usage. Set certain times of the day that, okay, these are the times that I'll check my email, my notifications. Outside of that, I won't be using it. Be mindful of the places where we use them, right? As we mentioned, so we're just reviewing here to not use them, to not take our phones with us in the bathroom, not take them with us in the bedroom. When it comes to social media, be mindful of the different things that you're posting. And when it comes to the dating apps, just be mindful of what we spoke about in terms of protecting yourself and saving yourself from any sort of potential sin. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the ability, whatever good was said, this is from Allah, whatever mistakes I made, may Allah forgive me for that. And I asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, allow us all to benefit from whatever good was said and allow us to bring it into practice. Ameen wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
If anybody has any questions, we can maybe open the floor for any questions.
Yes.
So you said the digital detoxing. What about if you get a prepaid flip phone?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, as I mentioned, you could get phones that have everything except for, GPS. Or sorry, that have GPS and nothing else. That's also an option. Just get a flip phone. Definitely, I would say that's definitely a great idea. That's probably the best way to go about it, because sometimes you do need to have some way that people can contact you. Uh-huh.
So let's say you were talking about how feeling jealousy when you see maybe your friends posting something online. Even if you're not trying to seek that and you find out somehow that they're doing something and you start to feel jealous, what is something you should do or something that you should do to stop being jealous or feel resentment from them?
You could repeat the question.
Oh yeah, sure. So the first question was about, just having a flip phone instead of a smartphone. So I would say that's definitely a great idea. And once again, certain things like GPS and whatnot may be necessary. So there are phones that you can get that have certain features but not other features. The second question is, how do you stop yourself, right? That's basically what you're saying, that you see something that makes you feel jealous, makes you feel that resentment. How do you stop yourself from having those feelings? When it comes to resentment for anyone, then one thing that I found very useful and others have benefited from a lot as well, and recently I actually saw a scholar who had mentioned something about it. I think this was on Laylatul Bara'ah, because on the 15th of Sha'ban, one of the people that's not forgiven is the one that holds resentment toward others. So what he mentioned was that one of the best things that you can do is that gift some good deeds to that person, right? That basically recite Surah Al-Ikhlas 10 times or whatever else, some form of good deed, right? Whatever it may be, pray 2 rakahs, whatever the case may be, send the reward to that person, right? This is shown to be very extremely effective in preventing that resentment. And also, the jealousy it's once again, it's a natural emotion, right? So a person should constantly be asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove those emotions from a person's heart. And once again, the main thing is to stop at the root of the problem, where you kind of just avoid, seeing those things as much as you can, and just try to focus on looking at those people that are below you. Try and think that, okay, this person may be superior to me in this way, but think of all the ways that I may be superior to them, that this is something that I am lacking. But there's so many other things that, alhamdulillah, that I have that this person doesn't have, right? So those are some of the ways to achieve that, inshallah. Yes.
I've read some places that it's been inconsistent. Like when you go and you use the bathroom, anything else but using the bathroom. Let's say you have a newspaper, you have your phone. Do you accrue bad deeds in that way?
Not necessarily. So the question is about you going to the restroom. Let's say it's not a phone, it's something like as simple as a newspaper. Just because you're doing something other than using the restroom, is it sinful? So no, not necessarily, right? Some scholars have said that if we're just looking at the action itself, then as long as you're not spending more time in the restroom than you would be anyway, then technically it's not, necessarily sinful. But because no one really does that, naturally, if someone has a book with them or their phone with them or whatever the case may be, especially the phone, as we mentioned, it can lead to other issues as well, then there is harm entailed. There's the potential that you could end up spending more time than necessary. So that's why it's better to avoid completely. But yes, if a person has that self-control, and some people do, then that's actually fine. As long as, once again, it's no disrespect toward, the name of Allah or anything like that, a person could technically, read a newspaper or something else, as long as it's not causing them to be in there longer than necessary. Anything else?
Where do we draw the line between just admiring someone for some characteristic they have that we would like to have as well, and being jealous about them having something that we don't?
Yeah, it goes back to, the whole discussion in Fadal A'man. The question is where do we draw the line between admiring someone versus feeling jealous toward them? So it goes back to that discussion, right? That one thing is hasad, one thing is ghibta, and there's the two interpretations of the hadith, right? That when it comes to the feelings that a person has, The hadith mentions that there's only 2 places where it's permissible. Others say that, if it was permissible, then it would be in these situations, right? So the point, I guess you could say, the line between jealousy and envy, as some have said, jealousy is where you, not only do you feel that that person doesn't deserve the blessing, but you feel that you should get it instead, right? Where you feel that that person should be deprived, whether I get it or not, okay? And one of the reasons why it's so detrimental to a person's iman and so condemned in the hadith is because of that aqidah issue, where you kind of are questioning Allah now, that why is this person being promoted, why is this person getting married, why is this person able to conceive children and I'm not able to do so. So that's kind of the most evil form of it, and that's what we're trying to avoid, is that if you're, for example, you just feel that, okay, this person has such and such a good quality, I wish I could be like that too, that's fine. In fact, you may find motivation in that, especially when it comes to spiritual things. But where you start to question the authority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and feel that you should be given something instead of them, or that they should be deprived of it whether you get it or not, that's where you've kind of crossed the line now. Anything else? Yes.
What's your opinion on like LinkedIn and these like business apps? Like, I know people are kind of afraid of like others, but also like don't want to come off as like showing off either. What's your opinion on those things?
To be honest, I'm not too familiar with LinkedIn, but I do know that, some employers do look at those sort of things. When it comes to like business perspective, or like when it comes to a person's job, there's some things that are necessary, right? Even when it comes to writing things on your resume, like, that's what, when it comes back to what we were talking about, don't give too much power to the evil eyes, such that, it's not preventing you from applying for a job, or, making a profile at LinkedIn, which could be beneficial for your job and whatnot. So would a person just basically try to limit, like, as far as like, you try to make it private, only share it with the people that you need to share it with, in which it would be beneficial for you. And at the same time, a person should just be making a lot of dua, right? So one of the best ways to protect yourself from another an evil eye is, once again, save yourself from that situation as much as you can, and then along with that, recite as much as, ad'iyah as possible, right? Whether it's the manzil, which are like 30 verses of the Quran that are very powerful in protecting a person, Ayatul Kursi, these sort of things. So a person, if they feel themselves they're compelled to be in that sort of situation, then they should just be mindful of reciting the du'as and try to limit as much as they can.
When you talked about like not being jealous towards others, thinking about like things you have and they don't have, like how do you like balance that from staying away from like being prideful and thinking you're better like than others in that sense?
I don't think I understand exactly what you mean. You're saying that
we want to be thankful for what we have.
Okay.
But then again, we don't want to be boastful, bragging, or think of ourselves as grandiose, entitled, better.
What does that have to do with jealousy, though?
No, because you said like so you don't get jealous from like other people's posts. You think of things like
Yeah.
you have like that they don't have. Right?
Oh, okay, that's what you're saying, right? So specifically, the instruction that I was mentioning earlier, that if you find something in someone that you feel envious of, and you want to save yourself from feeling jealousy, then one of the advices that was given was that you remember those qualities that you have that they don't. That's what you're talking about, right? Yeah, so I mean, do you remember that this is something Allah gave you, right? That comes to a lot of your blessings, that a person remembers, and this helps a person save themselves from pride in general, that just remember that whatever good I have, whether it's, good looks that I may have, whether it's intelligence, education, I'm good at sports, all of these different things, just remember that it's not my own capability that resulted in it, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who gave it to me, right? So that's a good way to, help save yourself from those feelings of pride. Does that kind of help answer your question? Anything else? Mm-hmm.
So when you're trying to balance between not trying to show off, so if, for example, there's like one amal that you want to do, there's one act of worship, for example, that you want to do, and you want to balance between not showing off in the sense that you want to do it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but at the same time, you know that doing the action, it's such an act, that specific act of worship is such that it's going to become normal to people.
Mm.
It's going to become something that people are obviously going to see or they're going to talk about somewhere. So in that sense, if you were to refrain from doing that, I think like that counts as like something that's not something you should do, right?
Yeah,
Just don't
right.
doing it.
Yeah.
So what would you do in that situation?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The question basically is that, sometimes you feel that there's certain action that I want to do, but if I do it, then it may come off as being like ostentatious. People are going to find out about it, and then that may mess up my intention and deprive me of the reward. So yeah, it has to do with that ostentation, the whole aspect of riyah, and that's good because that's actually one of the tricks of shaitan. That one of the ways that shaitan will try to trick a person is because he's very smart, right? He has years of experience, so he knows that I can trick this person by telling him that hey, or giving him this thought that if you do such and such action, then people are going to know, right? And that's one of the ways he's going to prevent you from doing that action. So that is one of the traps of shaitan. So a person should be aware of that. And once you're aware of it, you realize this is a thought from shaitan, a person should realize that no, this is an action that I need to do. It's extremely rewarding. And as we learn, in Jamaat as well, that what a person should do is check their intention, right? Before you do the action, during the action, as well as after the action. That's really what it all boils down to. That although those whisperings, they'll constantly be coming. Everyone gets those whispers from shaitan that, hey, you're actually doing it for someone else. Or, people are going to find out about it. You're going to lose the reward and whatnot. So a person just constantly reminds themselves. Before they do the action, make sure their intention is pure. During the action, when those thoughts come, you make istighfar and you try to fix your intention. And then after the action is complete, you just constantly remind yourself that this is something that's from the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's nothing from my own capability. And you just thank Allah and once again make istighfar for those changes in your intention that may occur. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah.
Does that help answer the question? Does the sisters have any way to ask questions? Or?
Wasn't there a Google form or on WhatsApp that we did last week? 2 weeks?
No, the sister just saying?
Yeah.
No, I think I heard in the opposite. They didn't say anything.
That's the best thing to do.
Oh, is there anything else? All right. Oh yeah.
So going back on the intention thing, so if there's like a situation, like say you're praying for Hajj or something along those lines where you're praying in a private area, and there's no one there to see you in that situation, is it still possible for your intention to be tainted?
Yeah, it is. So the question is that if someone's doing an action privately, then is it still possible that your intention may not be pure? So yeah, I remember hearing this in a Jummah bayan once, and then I repeated it in my bayan, and I remember afterwards somebody was mentioning that, how does that make any sense? But then I explained to the person that, hey, what can happen sometimes is that sometimes you're doing it for yourself, or otherwise known as your ego, that you're kind of just doing it to prove to yourself that you can do it. So that's an important thing. It's kind of like a higher level of spirituality, a spiritual dimension that not everyone needs to worry about, but it's true that happens sometimes, where even if you're doing something alone, that doesn't necessarily mean it's purely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a person still has the feelings, once again, don't let that prevent you from doing the action. But once again, a person should just remind themselves that, hey, I'm not doing this just to show that I can read this much Quran every day or that I can wake up for tahajjud. At the end of the day, I'm doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once again, the feelings will come. The feelings will come that your intention is not pure, but don't let that stop you from doing the amal. That should just push you to fix your intention even more and do istighfar and just consistently ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept the deed despite the deficiency that may be there. Okay.